The Bush administration tried to privilege that over the other 23, and when WMD was not found in the quantities or even at all, then the entire casus belli fell apart, but it still remained a valid reason then and now to remove that map. There was a second reason, third reason, besides WMD and these other 22 reasons, and besides this changed scenario after 9/11, there was an idea that something had gone wrong in the Middle East. 21 countries were off the bus of history. People looked at Latin America, people looked at South Korea, and they saw an opening of market economies, creation of wealth, consensual government, and the Middle East had 21 illegitimate regimes, partly because of their oil realpolitik that we had played in, and this was the calculus that we tried to unravel going back to the Iranian hostage crisis. And what was the calculus? In lieu of feeding people, providing them jobs, giving them liberty and freedom, equality between women, these governments were blaming the United States and the Jews and Israel, and that's not my words, it's theirs, pigs and apes, in their state-controlled, censored presses, to blame others for their fault, and as part of that unholy alliance, they made a satanic bargain with the Islamicists, whether Hamas or Hezbollah or Al-Qaeda, and they said, you can attack the Americans with, you can use subsidies, you can use sanctuary, whether it's in Afghanistan or Abu Nidal or Abu Abbas or the Al-Qaeda in Kurdistan or the Saudi connection or the Pakistani connection, and we will give you cover. Just don't attack us. And out of that thinking, the Americans said, we have to attack the root causes. If you can pressure autocracy and remove the worst, and the worst governments in the world with the Taliban and Saddam Hussein, and give democracy a chance, then perhaps these people can take credit for their successes and accept the blames for their own self-inflicted pathologies without blaming us and subsidizing terrorists to get the heat off themselves. And we also thought, you know, democracy, there's a logic to it. It's not true that Islamic peoples cannot have democracy. They have it in Indonesia, Malaysia, India, Turkey. It's not true that democracy just appears out of the head of Zeus. Our own history shows, Italy shows, Japan shows, Korea shows, Germany, that sometimes, and most often, in fact, democracy occurs out of violence. And if we were worried in the Cold War about the fear of evil regimes multiplying, we were empowered by the hope that good regimes would lead to one another. And out of that faith in democracy, this idea came not just to remove Saddam, but to give the people of Iraq a chance to erase 30 years of autocracy with the hope that it would destroy this calculus. And here we are 20 months later. Tragic cost, 1,400 Americans dead. But look at the world since then. It's not true what people say, the United States is hated and the world is a mess. No U.S. soldier is in Saudi Arabia. There's no UN embargo of Iraq. Those were the two reasons, by the way, in 1998, bin Laden said he should wage war against us. They're gone. He never said that he's going to wage peace with us now. Saudi Arabia, the troops are out. Pakistan's nuclear roguery has been uncovered. Libya has come clean. Saudi Arabia's facing, believe it, pressure from us, who used to appease that atrocious government. Mubarak has been put on notice that the dynasty must cease at his death. There's been an election in Ukraine as a spirit. Afghanistan has a democracy. All of this shows real progress. The West Bank, one of the most controversial things that Bush did was alienate and ostracize Yasser Arafat. He was criticized, and yet when he died, he was not a mythic figure, but even in the Arab world, his passing was not lamented. Now we have an election there. Elections in Afghanistan, Iraq, West Bank. Nobody would have believed that on September 10th, 2001. The problem with all this is it requires from all of us continued will and resolve and the ability to endure caricature, misrepresentation, and to persevere, because if we were to withdraw now, a lot of good people are going to be killed, and everything that we've seen that's positive is going to work in reverse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will hear the opening negative statement. Professor Edsforth will have 15 minutes.
Thanks for coming out tonight. I want to thank the sponsors of the event for making this possible. It's nice to be at Dartmouth still. And I want to take this opportunity to thank President Wright, the chair of the Malice program, Don Pease, and Dean Michael Massanduno for making it possible for me to come back and teach here this year and next year, and I hope until I retire from teaching about 8 or 9 years down the road. My time is short, and there's much that I've prepared that I could say and present. I wasn't quite prepared for the focus on the war in Iraq, since our question is somewhat different tonight, but I'll get to that, I'm sure, in one of the subsequent stages of this debate. So let me lay out some of the big ideas that I've prepared and let you consider them as in the form of a different way to address this question. First of all, let me start with the basic premise that I start with as a peace activist, not a pacifist. As many of you know, if you were here back a few years ago, I completely supported the American invasion of Afghanistan to topple the Taliban regime that sheltered the attackers on the United States. I'm a peace activist, not a pacifist. I believe that war is sometimes necessary, but because all war is mass murder, and that's what it really is, it must have many justifiable reasons, not a single reason, and certainly not a reason of expediency. War is an environment that humans create, which is very much different from any other environment we create. And since we're a collection of instinctual responses to our environment, we should recognize that in war, our worst instincts are encouraged and even celebrated. That in war, and wars we send young people like you to fight, you young people become killers and torturers, because that's what war brings out whenever war is the environment that we create. Now, those of us who are peace activists and believe in a just war tradition believe that war has to be encased as tightly as possible in a set of restrictions governing the onset of war and actual warfare that try to limit that release of our worst possible instincts, our instinct to kill, our delight in cruelty, which are part of war and have been very much part of this war in Iraq, as we've seen. Now, I was first asked to debate this question: should the United States promote a free society in Iraq? And I responded to Charles Kuender of the Dartmouth Review, who was organizing this debate. I said, I can't debate that question. That's a no-brainer. Only a fool would take the negative on that position. Of course the United States should promote a free society in Iraq. Isn't the question, how should we do this? And probably also, what do we mean by a free society? Because I suspect that also embedded in this question of ours tonight, which is a very complex and in a way muddled question, is a debate over whether or not we in the United States, or at least our government in the United States, would call a society free if it chose not to embrace a neoliberal market economy, not to embrace Western legal tradition as a basis for its constitution and its own legal system, whether it chose to do something different than the model which we present to the world as the model of a free society. The real question, I think, that I want to address first at least, is the question of how should the United States promote free societies? And a very important principle in the just war approach to warfare, and the question of when is war justified, is the question of, is it the last resort? Have you exhausted all other possibilities?